Pax vobiscum, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to continue reading Black Beauty by Anna Sewell, and today we will be completing this book together. And I do hope that you have enjoyed the readings thus far, and enjoy these few final chapters as we finally see the conclusion of the autobiography of a horse. Captain and I were great friends. He was a noble old fellow, and he was very good company. I never thought that he would have to leave his home and go down the hill, but his turn came, and this is how it happened. I was not there, but I heard all about it. He and Jerry had taken a party to the great railway station over London Bridge, and were coming back somewhere between the bridge and the monument, when Jerry saw a brewer's empty dray coming along, drawn by two powerful horses. The drayman was lashing his horses with his heavy whip. The dray was light, and they started off at a furious rate. The man had no control over them, and the street was full of traffic. One young girl was knocked down and run over, and the next moment they dashed up against our cab. Both the wheels were torn off, and the cab was thrown over. Captain was dragged down, the shaft splintered, and one of them ran into his side. Jerry, too, was thrown, but was only bruised. Nobody could tell how he escaped. He always said 'twas a miracle. When poor Captain was got up, he was found to be very much cut and knocked about. Jerry led him home gently, and a sad sight it was to see the blood soaking into his white coat and dropping from his side and shoulder. The drayman was proved to be very drunk and was fined, and the brewer had to pay damages to our master. But there was no one to pay damages to poor Captain. The farrier and Jerry did the best that they could to ease his pain and make him comfortable. The fly had to be mended, and for several days I did not go out, and Jerry earned nothing. The first time we went to the stand after the accident, the governor came up to hear how Captain was. "He'll never get used to it," said Jerry, "and he'll never get over it, at least not from my work, so the farrier said this morning. He says he may do for carting and that sort of work. And what has put me out very much, carting indeed! I've seen what horses come to at work around London. I only wish all the drunkards could be put in a lunatic asylum instead of being allowed to run afoul of sober people. If they would break their own bones and smash their own carts and lame their own horses, that would be their own affair, and we might let them alone. But it seems to me that the innocent always suffer. And then they talk about compensation. You can't make compensation. There's all the trouble and the vexation and loss of time. Besides losing a good horse that's like an old friend. It's nonsense talking of compensation. But there's one devil that I should like to see in the bottomless pit more than the other. It's the drink devil." "I say, Jerry," said the governor, "you are treading pretty hard on my toes, you know. I'm not so good as you, more shame to me. I wish I was." "Well," said Jerry, "why don't you cut with it, governor? You are too good a man to be a slave to such a thing." "I'm a great fool, Jerry, but I tried once for 2 days, and I thought I should have died. How did you do?" "I had a hard work at it for several weeks. You see, I never did get drunk, but I found that I was not my own master, and that when the craving came on it was hard work to say no. I saw that one of us must knock under, the drink devil or Jerry Barker, and I said that it should not be Jerry Barker. God helping me, but it was a struggle, and I wanted all the help I could get, for till I tried to break the habit I did not know how strong it was. Oh, but then Polly took such great pains that I should have good food, and when the craving came in I used to get a cup of coffee or some peppermint or to read a bit in my book. That was always a help to me. Sometimes I had to say over and over to myself, 'Give up the drink or lose your soul. Give up the drink or break Polly's heart.' But thanks be to God and my dear wife, my chains were broken, and now for 10 years I have not tasted a drop, and never wish for it." "I've a great mind to try it," said Grant, "for 'tis a poor thing to not be one's own master." "Oh, do, governor, do, and you'll never repent it. And what a help it would be to some of the poor fellows in our rank if they saw you do without it. I know there's 2 or 3 that would like to keep out of that tavern if they could." At first Captain seemed to do well, but he was a very old horse, and it was only his wonderful constitution and Jerry's care that had kept him up at cab work for so long. Now he broke down very much. The farrier said he might mend up enough to sell for a few pounds, but Jerry said no. A few pounds got by selling a good old servant into hard work and misery would canker all the rest of his money. And he thought the kindest thing he could do for the fine old fellow was to be sure to put a bullet through his head, and then he would never suffer more. For he did not know where to find a kind master for the rest of his days. The day after this it was decided. Harry took me to the forge for some new shoes, and when I returned Captain was gone. I and the family all felt it very much. Jerry had now to look out for another horse, and he soon heard of one through an acquaintance who was an undergroom in a nobleman's stables. He was a valuable young horse, but he had run away, smashed into another carriage, flung his lordship out, and so cut and blemished himself that he was no longer fit for a gentleman's stables, and the coachman had orders to look round and sell him as well as he could. "I can do with high spirits," said Jerry, "if a horse is not vicious or hard-mouthed." "Oh, there is not a bit of vice in him," said the man. "His mouth is very tender, and I think myself that was the cause of the accident. You see, he had just been clipped, and the weather was bad, and he had not had exercise enough, and when he did go out he was as full of a spring as a balloon. Our governor, the coachman I mean, had him harnessed in as tight and strong as he could, with a martingale and the check rein, a very sharp curb, and the reins put in at the bottom bar. It's my belief that it made the horse mad, being so tender in the mouth and so full of spirit." "Likely enough. I'll come and see him," said Jerry. The next day Hotspur, that was his name, came home. He was a fine brown horse, without a white hair on him, as tall as Captain, with a very handsome head, and only 5 years old. I gave him a friendly greeting by way of good fellowship, but did not ask him any questions. The first night he was very restless. Instead of lying down, he kept jerking his halter rope up and down through the ring, and knocking the block about against the manger till I could not sleep. However, the next day, after 5 or 6 hours in the cab, he came in quiet and sensible. Jerry patted and talked to him a good deal, and very soon they understood each other. And Jerry said that was an easy bit, and plenty of work he would be as gentle as a lamb, and that it was an ill wind that blew nobody good, for his lordship had lost 100-guinea favourite, the cabman had gained a good horse with all his strength in him. Hotspur thought it was a great come-down to be a cab horse, and was disgusted at standing in the rank. But he confessed to me at the end of the week that an easy mouth and a free head made up for a great deal, and after all, the work was not so degrading as having one's own head and tail fastened to each other at the saddle. In fact, he settled in well, and Jerry liked him very much. For some people, Christmas and the New Year are very merry times. But for the cabman and cabman's horses it is no holiday. It may be a harvest. There are so many parties, balls, and places of amusement open that the work is hard and often late. Sometimes driver and horse have to wait for hours in the rain or frost, shivering with the cold, while the merry people within are dancing away to the music. I wonder if the beautiful ladies ever think of the weary cabman waiting in his box, his patient beast standing, till his legs get stiff with cold. I had now most of the evening work, as I was well accustomed to standing, and Jerry was also more afraid of Hotspur taking cold. We had a great deal of work in the Christmas week, and Jerry's cough was bad. But however late we were, Polly sat up for him, and came out with a lantern to meet him, looking anxious and troubled. On the evening of the New Year we had to take 2 gentlemen to a house in one of the West End squares. We set them down at 9 o'clock, and were told to come again at 11. "But," said one, "as it is a card party, you may have to wait for a few minutes, but don't be late." As the clock struck 11, we were at the door, for Jerry was always punctual. The clock chimed the quarters, 1, 2, 3.
and then struck 12, but the door did not open. The wind had been very changeable, with squalls of rain during the day, but now it came on sharp driving sleet, which seemed to come all the way round. It was very cold, and there was no shelter. Jerry got off his box and pulled one of my cloths a little more over my neck. Then he took a turn or two up and down, stamping his feet, and then he began to beat his arms. But that set him off coughing. So he opened the cab door and sat at the bottom with his feet on the pavement, and was a little sheltered. Still the clock chimed the quarters, and no one came. At 12:30 he rang the bell and asked the servant if he would be wanted that night. "Oh, yes, you'll be wanted safe enough," said the man. "You must not go, it will be over soon." And again Jerry sat down, but his voice was so hoarse I could hardly hear him. At 1:15 the door opened, and the two gentlemen came out. They got into the cab without a word, and told Jerry where to drive. It was nearly 2 miles. My legs were numb with cold, and I thought I should have stumbled. When the men got out, they never said they were sorry to have kept us waiting so long, but were angry at the charge. However, as Jerry never charged more than was his due, so he never took less, and they had to pay for the 2 hours and a quarter waiting, but it was hard-earned money to Jerry. At last we got home. He could hardly speak, and his cough was dreadful. Polly asked no questions, but opened the door and held the lantern for him. "Can't I do something?" she said. "Yes, get Jack something warm and then boil me some gruel." This was said in a hoarse whisper. He could hardly get his breath, but he gave me a rub down as usual, and even went up into the hayloft for an extra bundle of straw for my bed. Polly brought me a warm mash that made me comfortable, and then they locked the door. It was late the next morning before anyone came, and then it was only Harry. He cleaned and fed us and swept out our stalls, and then he put the straw back again as if it was Sunday. He was very still, and neither whistled nor sang. At noon he came again and gave us our food and water, and this time Dolly came with him. She was crying, and I could gather from what they said that Jerry was dangerously ill, and the doctor said it was a bad case. So 2 days passed, and there was great trouble indoors. We only saw Harry and sometimes Dolly. I think she came for company, for Polly was always with Jerry, and he had to be kept very quiet. On the third day, while Harry was in the stable, a tap came at the door, and Governor Grant came in. "I wouldn't go to the house, my boy," he said, "but I want to know how your father is." "He is very bad," said Harry. "He can't be much worse. They call it bronchitis. The doctor thinks it will turn one way or another tonight." "Oh, that's bad, very bad," said Grant, shaking his head. "I know 2 men who died of that last week. Takes 'em off in no time. But while there's life, there's hope, so you must keep up your spirits." "Yes," said Harry quickly. "And the doctor said that if father, well, he had a better chance than most men, because he didn't drink. He said yesterday the fever was so high that if father had been a drinking man, it would have burned him up like a piece of paper. But I believe he thinks he will get through it. Don't you think he will, Mr. Grant?" The governor looked puzzled. "Well, if there's any rule that good men should get over these things, I'm sure he will, my boy. He's the best man I know. I'll look in early tomorrow." And so early next morning he was there. "Well," said he. "Father is better," said Harry. "Mother hopes he will get over it." "Thank God," said the governor. "And now you must keep him warm and keep his mind easy. And that brings me to the horses. You see, Jack will be all the better for the rest of a week or two in a warm stable, and you can easily take him a turn up and down the street to stretch his legs. But this young one, if he does not get work, he will soon be all up on end, as you may say, and will be rather too much for you. And when he does go out, there will be an accident." "It's like that now," said Harry. "I've kept him short of corn, but he's so full of spirit I don't know what to do with him." "Just so," said Grant. "Now look here. Will you tell your mother that if she is agreeable, I will come for him every day till something is arranged, and take him for a good spell of work. And whatever he earns, I will bring your mother half of it, and that will help with the horses' feed. Your father's in a good club, I know, but that won't keep the horses, and they'll be eating their heads off all this time. I'll come at noon and hear what she says." And without waiting for Harry's thanks, he was gone. At noon I think he went and saw Polly, for he and Harry came to the stable together, harnessed Hotspur, and took him out. For a week or more he came for Hotspur, and when Harry thanked him or said anything about his kindness, he laughed it off, saying it was all good luck for him, for his horses were wanting a little rest, which they would not otherwise have had. Jerry grew steadily better, but the doctor said he must never go back to cab work again if he wished to be an old man. The children had many consultations together about what father and mother would do, and how they would help earn money. One afternoon Hotspur was brought in very wet and dirty. "The streets are nothing but slush," said the governor. "It will give you a good warming, my boy, to get him clean and dry."
"All right, governor," said Harry. "I shall not leave him till he is. You know I've been trained by my father."
"I wish all boys had been trained like you," said the governor. While Harry was sponging off the mud from Hotspur's body and legs, Dolly came in, looking very full of something.
"Who lives at Fairstowe, Harry? Mother has got a letter from Fairstowe. She seemed so glad and ran upstairs to father with it." "Don't you know? Why, it is the name of Mrs. Fowler's place, mother's old mistress, you know. The lady that father met last summer, who sent me and you 5 shillings each." "Oh, Mrs. Fowler! Of course I know all about her. I wonder what she is writing to mother about."
"Well, mother wrote to her last week," said Harry. "You know she told father if he ever gave up the cab work she would like to know. I wonder what she says. Run in and see, Dolly." Harry scrubbed away at Hotspur with a whoosh, whoosh, like any old hostler. In a few minutes Dolly came dancing into the stable.
"Oh, Harry, there was never anything so beautiful. Mrs. Fowler says we're all to go and live near her. There's a cottage now empty that will just suit us, with a garden and a hen house and apple trees and everything. And her coachman is going away in the spring, and then she will want father in his place. And there are good families round where you can get work in the garden or the stable, or as a page boy. And there's a good school for me. Oh, and mother is laughing and crying by turns, and father does look so happy."
"That's uncommon jolly," said Harry. "Just the right thing, I should say. It will suit father and mother both. But I don't intend to be a page boy with tight clothes and rows of buttons. I'll be a groom or a gardener." It was quickly settled that as soon as Jerry was well enough they would remove to the country, and that the cab and horses should be sold as soon as possible. This was heavy news for me, for I was not young now, and could not look for any improvement in my condition. Since I left Birtwick I had never been so happy as with my dear Master Jerry. But 3 years of cab work, even under the best conditions, will tell on one's strength, and I felt that I was not the horse I had been. Grant said at once that he would take Hotspur, and there were men on the stand who would have bought me, but Jerry said I should not go to cab work again with just anybody, and the governor promised to find a place for me where I should be comfortable. Then the day came for going away. Jerry had not been allowed to go out yet, and I never saw him after that New Year's Eve. Polly and the children came to bid me good-bye.
"Oh, poor old Jack, dear old Jack. I wish we could take you with us," she said.
And then laying her hand on my mane, she put her face close to my neck and kissed me. Dolly was crying and kissed me too. Harry stroked me a great deal, but said nothing, only he seemed very sad. And so I was led away to my new place. I was sold to a corn dealer and baker whom Jerry knew, and with him he thought I should have a good food and fair work. In the first he was quite right, and if my master had always been on the premises, I do not think I should have been overloaded. But there was a foreman who was always hurrying and driving everyone, and frequently when I had quite a full load he would order something else to be taken on. My carter, whose name was Jakes, often said that it was more than I ought to take, but the other always overruled him. "'Was no use going back twice when once would do, and he chose to get business forward." Jakes, like the other carters, always had the check rein up, which prevented me from drawing easily. By the time I had been there 3 or 4 months, I found the work telling very much on my strength. One day I was loaded more than usual, and part of the road was a steep uphill. I used all my strength, but I could not get on, and was obliged to continually stop. This did not please my driver, and he laid his whip on badly. "Get on, you lazy fellow," he said, "or I'll make you." Again I started with the heavy load and struggled on a few yards, and again the whip came down, and again I struggled forward. The pain of that great cart whip was sharp, but my mind was hurt quite as much as my poor sides. To be punished and abused when I was doing my very best was so hard it took all the heart out of me. A third time he was flogging me cruelly, when a lady stepped quickly up to him, and said in a sweet earnest voice, "Oh, pray do not whip your good horse any more. I am sure he is doing all he can, and the road is very steep. I am sure he is doing his best." "Well, if doing his best won't get this load up, he must do something more than his best, that's all I know, ma'am," said Jakes.
"But is it not a heavy load?" she said.
"Yes, yes, too heavy," he said. "That's not my fault. Foreman came in just as we were starting and would have put 300 weight more on him to save trouble, and I must get on with it as well as I can."
He was raising the whip again when the lady said, "Pray stop. I think I can help you if you will let me."
The man laughed.
"You see," she said, "you do not give him a fair chance. He cannot use all of his power with his head held back as it is with that check rein. If you would take it off, I am sure he would do better. Do try it," she said persuasively. "I should be very glad if you would."
"Well, well," said Jakes with a short laugh. "Anything to please a lady, of course. And how far down do you wish it, ma'am?"
"Oh, quite down. Give him his head altogether."
The rein was taken off, and in a moment I put my head down to my very knees. What a comfort it was! And then I tossed it up and down several times to get the aching stiffness out of my neck.
"Oh, poor fellow, that is what you wanted," she said, patting and stroking me with her gentle hand. "And now if you will speak kindly to him and lead him, I do believe he will be able to do better."
Jakes took the rein. "Come on, Blackie." I put down my head and threw my whole weight against the collar. I spared no strength. The load moved on, and I pulled it steadily up the hill, then stopped to take a breath. The lady had walked along the footpath and now came across the road. She stroked and patted my neck, as I had not been patted for many a long day.
"You see, he is quite willing when you give him a chance. I am sure he is a fine-tempered creature, and I dare say has known better days. Oh, you won't put that rein on him again, will you?"
For he was just going to hitch it up on the old plan. "Well, ma'am, I can't deny that having his head has helped him up the hill, and I'll remember it another time and thank you, ma'am. But if he went without a check rein, I should be the laughing stock of all the carters. It's the fashion, you see."
"Is it not better," she said, "to lead a good fashion than to follow a bad one? A great many gentlemen do not use check reins now. Our carriage horses have not worn them for 15 years, and work with much less fatigue than those who have them. Besides," she added in a very serious voice, "we have no right to distress any of God's creatures without a very good reason. We call them dumb animals, and so they are, for they cannot tell us how they feel. But they do not suffer less because they have no words. But I must not detain you now. I thank you for trying my plan with your good horse, and I'm sure you will find it far better than the whip." Good day."
And with another soft pat on my neck, she stepped lightly across the path. I saw her no more. "Now that was a real lady, I'll be bound for it," said Jakes to himself. "She spoke just as polite as if I were a gentleman, and I'll try her plan uphill at any rate." And I must do him the justice to say that he let my rein out several holes, and going uphill after that he always gave me my head. But the heavy loads went on. Good feed and fair rest will keep up one's strength under full work, but no horse can stand against overloading. And I was getting so thoroughly pulled down from this cause that a younger horse was brought in my place. I may as well mention here what I suffered at this time from another cause. I've heard other horses speak of it, but never myself had experienced this evil. This was a badly lighted stable. There was only one very small window at the end, and the consequence was that the stalls were almost dark. Besides the depressing effect this had on my spirits, it very much weakened my sight, and when I was suddenly brought out of the darkness into the glare of daylight, it was very painful to my eyes. Several times I stumbled over the threshold and could scarcely see where I was going. I believe, had I stayed there very long, that I should have become purblind. That would have been a great misfortune. For I've heard say that a stone-blind horse was safer to drive than one who had imperfect sight, as it generally makes them very timid. However, I escaped without any permanent injury to my sight, and thus was sold to a large cab owner. My new master I shall never forget. He had black eyes and a hooked nose. His mouth was full of teeth as a bulldog's, and his voice was as harsh as the grinding of cartwheels over gravelled stones. His name was Nicholas Skinner, and I believe he was the man that poor seedy Sam drove for. I have heard men say that seeing is believing, but I should say that feeling is believing. For much as I had seen before, I never knew till now the utter misery of a cab horse's life. Skinner had a low set of cabs and a low set of drivers. He was hard on the men, and the men were hard on the horses. In this place there was no Sunday rest, and it was in the heat of summer. Sometimes on a Sunday morning a party of fast men would hire the cab for the day, 4 of them inside and another with the driver, and I had to take them 10 or 15 miles out into the country and back again. Never would any of them get down to walk up a hill, let it ever be so steep or the day ever so hot, unless, indeed, when the driver was afraid I should not manage it, and sometimes I was so fevered and warm that I could hardly touch my food. Oh, how I used to long for the nice bran mash with niter in it that Jerry used to give us on Saturday nights in hot weather. They used to cool us down and make us so comfortable. Then we had 2 nights and a whole day for unbroken rest, and on Monday morning we were as fresh as young horses again. But here there was no rest, and my driver was just as hard as his master. He had a cruel whip with something so sharp at the end that it sometimes drew blood, and he would even whip me under the belly and flip the lash about my head. Indignities like this took the heart out of me terribly, but I still did my best and never hung back, for, as poor Ginger said, it was no use. Men are the strongest. My life was now so utterly wretched that I wished I might, like Ginger, drop dead at my work and be out of my misery, and one day my wish very nearly came to pass. I went on the stand at 8 in the morning, and had done a good share of work when we had to take a fare to the railway. A long train was just expected in, so my driver pulled up at the back of some of the outside cabs to take the chance of a return fare. It was a very heavy rain, and as all the cabs were soon engaged, ours was called for. There was a party of 4, a noisy, blustering man with a lady, a little boy and a young girl, and a great deal of luggage. The lady and the boy got into the cab, and while the man ordered about the luggage, the young girl came and looked at me. "Papa," she said, "I am sure this poor horse cannot take us all and our luggage so far. He is so very weak and worn up. Do look at him." "Oh, he's all right, miss," said my driver. "He's strong enough." The porter, who was pulling about some heavy boxes, suggested to the gentleman, as there was so much luggage, whether he would not take a second cab. "Can your horse do it, or can't he?" said the blustering man. "Oh, we can do it all right, sir. Send up the boxes, porter. He can take on more than that." And he helped to haul up a box so heavy I could feel the springs go down.
Papa, Papa, do take a second cab, said the young girl in a beseeching tone. I'm sure we are wrong. I'm sure it's very cruel.
"Nonsense, Grace, get in at once, and don't make all this fuss. A pretty thing it would be if a man of business had to examine every cab horse before he hired it. The man knows his own business, of course. There, get in and hold your tongue."
My gentle friend had to obey. Box after box was dragged up and lodged on top of the cab or settled by the side of the driver. At last all was ready. With his usual jerk at the rein and slash of the whip, he drove out of the station. The load was very heavy, and I had had neither food nor rest since morning. But I did my best, as I always had done, in spite of cruelty and injustice. I got along fairly till we came to Ludgate Hill, but there was the heavy load, and my own exhaustion was too much. I was struggling to keep on, goaded on by constant chucks of the rein and use of the whip, when in a single moment, I cannot tell how, my feet slipped from under me, and I fell heavily to the ground on my side. The suddenness and the force with which I fell seemed to beat all the breath out of my body. I lay perfectly still. Indeed, I had no power to move. I thought now I was going to die. I heard a sort of confusion round me, loud, angry voices and the getting down of the luggage, but it was all like a dream. I thought I heard that sweet, pitiful voice saying, "Oh, that poor horse! It was all our fault!" Someone came and loosened the throat strap of my bridle, and undid the traces which kept the collar so tight upon me. Someone said, "Well, he's dead. He'll never get up again." Then I could hear a policeman giving orders, but I did not even open my eyes. I could only draw a gasping breath now and then. Some cold water was thrown over my head, and some cordial was poured into my mouth, and something was covered over me. I cannot tell how long I lay there, but I found my life coming back, and a kind-voiced man was patting me and encouraging me to rise. After some more cordial had been given to me, and after one or two attempts, I staggered to my feet, and was gently led to some stables which were close by. Here I was put into a well-littered stall, and some warm gruel was brought to me, which I drank thankfully. In the evening I was sufficiently recovered to be led back to Skinner's stables, where I think they did the best they could for me. In the morning Skinner came with a farrier to look at me. He examined me very closely and said, "Now this is a case of overwork more than disease, and if you could give him a run off for 6 months he would be able to work again. But right now there is not an ounce of strength left in him." "Well, then he must go to the dogs," said Skinner. "I have no meadows to nurse sick horses in. He might get well or he might not. That sort of thing doesn't suit my business. My plan is to work them as long as they'll go, and then sell 'em for what they'll fetch at the knacker's or elsewhere." "Well, if he was broken-winded," said the farrier, "you had better have him killed out of hand, but he is not. There is a sale of horses coming off in about 10 days. If you rest him and feed him, he may pick up. You may get more than his skin is worth at any rate." Upon this advice, Skinner, rather unwillingly, I think, gave orders that I should be well fed and cared for, and the stableman, happily for me, carried out the orders with a much better will than his master had in giving them. 10 days of perfect rest, plenty of good oats, hay, bran mashes, with boiled linseed mixed in with them, did more to get up my condition than anything else could have done. Those linseed mashes were delicious, and I began to think, after all, it might be better to live than to go to the dogs. When the 12th day after the accident came,
I was taken to the sale a few miles out of London. I felt that any change from my present place must be an improvement, so I held up my head and hoped for the best. At this sale, of course, I found myself in the company with the broken-down old horses, some lame, some broken-winded, some old, and some that I am sure it would have been merciful to shoot. Buyers and sellers, too, many of them, looked not much better off than the poor beasts they were bargaining for. There were poor old men trying to get a horse or pony for a few pounds that might drag about some little wood or a coal cart. There were poor men trying to sell a worn-out beast for 2 or 3 pounds, rather than have the greater loss of killing him. Some of them looked as if poverty and hard times had hardened them all over, but there were others that I would have willingly used the last of my strength in serving. Poor and shabby, but kind and human, with voices that I could trust. There was one tottering old man who took a great fancy to me and I to him, but I was not strong enough. Oh, it was an anxious time. Coming from the better part of the fair, I noticed a man who looked like a gentleman farmer, with a young boy by his side. He had a broad back and round shoulders, and a kind, ruddy face, and he wore a broad-brimmed hat. When he came up to me and my companions, he stood still and gave a pitiful look round upon us. I saw his eye rest on me. I still had a good mane and tail, which did something for my appearance. I pricked my ears and looked at him. "Now there's a horse, Willie, that has known better days."
Poor old fellow, said the boy. Do you think, Grandpapa, he was ever a carriage horse?
"Oh, yes, my boy," said the farmer, coming closer. "He might have been anything when he was young. Look at his nostrils and his ears, the shape of his neck and shoulder. Now there's a great deal of breeding about that horse." He put out his hand and gave a kind pat on my neck. I put out my nose and answered to his kindness. The boy stroked my face.
Poor old fellow. See, Grandpapa, how well he understands kindness. Oh, could you not buy him and make him young again, as you did with Ladybird?
"Oh, my dear boy, I can't make all old horses young. Besides, Ladybird was not so very old. She was just run down and badly used."
Well, Grandpapa, I don't believe that this one is old. Look at his mane and tail. Oh, I wish you would look into his mouth, and then you could tell, though he's so very thin. His eyes are not sunk in like some old horses.
The old gentleman laughed. "Bless the boy, he is as horsey as his old grandfather."
Oh, but do look at his mouth, Grandpapa, and ask the price. I am sure he would grow young again in our meadows.
The man who had brought me for sale now put in his word. "Now, that young gentleman's a real knowing one, sir. Now, fact is, this here hoss is just pulled down with overwork in the calves. He's not an old one, and I heard as well how the veterinary would say that a good 6 months' run off would set him right, being how his wind was not broken. I've had the tending of him these 10 days past, and a gratefuller, pleasanter animal I've never met. 'Twould be worth a gentleman's while to give a £5 note for him, at least give him a chance. I'll be bound he'll be worth £20 next spring." The old gentleman laughed, and the little boy looked up eagerly.
Oh, Grandpapa, did you not say that the colt sold for £5 more than you expected? You would not be poor if you did buy this one.
The farmer slowly felt my legs, which were much swelled and strained. Then he looked at my mouth. "13 or 14, I should say. Just trot him out, will you?" I arched my poor thin neck, raised my tail a little, and threw out my legs as well as I could, for they were very stiff. "What's the lowest you will take for him?" said the farmer as I came back. £5, sir. That is the lowest price my master set." "'Tis a speculation," said the old man, shaking his head, but at the same time slowly drawing out his purse. "Quite a speculation. Have you any more business here?" he said, counting the sovereigns into his hand. "Oh, sir, I can take him for you to the inn, if you please." "Do so. I am going there now." They walked forward, and I was left behind. The boy could hardly control his delight, and the old gentleman seemed to enjoy his pleasure. I had a good feed at the end, and then was gently ridden home by a servant of my new master's, and turned into a large meadow with a shed in one corner of it. Mr. Thoroughgood, for that was the name of my benefactor, gave orders that I should have hay and oats every night and morning, and run of the meadow during the day, and "You, Willie," said he, "must take the oversight of him. I give him in charge to you." The boy was proud of his charge, and undertook it in all seriousness. There was not a day when he did not pay me a visit, sometimes picking me out from among the other horses and giving me a bit of carrot or something good, or sometimes standing by me while I ate my oats. He always came with kind words and caresses, and of course I grew very fond of him. He called me old crony, as I used to come to him in the field and follow him about. Sometimes he brought his grandfather, who always looked closely at my legs. "Now this is our point, Willie," he would say. "Money's improving so steadily that I think we shall see a change for the better in the spring." The perfect rest, the good food, the soft turf, and gentle exercise soon began to tell on my condition and my spirits. I had a good constitution from my mother, and I was never strained when I was young, so I had a much better chance than many horses who had been worked before they came to their full strength. During the winter my legs improved so much that I began to feel quite young again. The spring came round, and one day in March Mr. Thoroughgood determined that he would try me in the phaeton. I was well pleased, and he and Willie drove me a few miles. My legs were not stiff now, and I did the work with perfect ease. "Now he's growing young, Willie. We must give him a little gentle work now, and by midsummer he'll be as good as Ladybird. He has a beautiful mouth and good paces. They can't be better."
Oh, Grandpapa, how glad I am you bought him.
"So am I, my boy. But he has to thank you more than me. We must now be looking for a quiet, genteel place for him where he will be valued." One day during this summer the groom cleaned and dressed me with such extraordinary care that I thought some new change must be at hand. He trimmed my fetlocks and legs, passed the tarbrush over my hoofs, and even parted my forelock. I think the harness had an extra polish even. Willie seemed half anxious, half merry, as he got into the chaise with his grandfather. "If the ladies take to him," said the old gentleman, "they'll be suited and he'll be suited. We can but try." At the distance of a mile or two from the village we came to a pretty low house, with a lawn and shrubbery at the front and a drive-up to the door. Willie rang the bell and asked if Miss Bloomfield or Miss Ellen was at home. Yes, they were. So, while Willie stayed with me, Mr. Thoroughgood went into the house. In about 10 minutes he returned, followed by 3 ladies. One tall, pale lady, wrapped in a white shawl, leaned on a younger lady with dark eyes and a merry face, and the other, a very stately-looking person, was Miss Bloomfield. They all came and looked at me and asked questions. The younger lady, that was Miss Ellen, took to me very much, and she said she was sure she would like me, I had such a good face. The tall, pale lady said she should always be nervous in riding behind a horse that had once been down, as I might come down again, and if I did she should never get over the fright. "You see, ladies," said Mr. Thoroughgood, "many first-rate horses have had their knees broken through the carelessness of their drivers without any fault of their own. And from what I see of this horse, I should say that is his case. But of course I do not wish to influence you. If you incline to have him on trial, and then on your coachman, he can see what he thinks of him." "You have always been such a good adviser to us about our horses," said the stately lady, "that your recommendations would go a long way with me, and if my sister Lavinia sees no objection, we will accept your offer of a trial with thanks." It was then arranged that I should be sent for the next day. In the morning a smart-looking young man came for me. At first he looked pleased, but when he saw my niece he said in a disappointed voice, "I don't think, sir, you would have recommended my ladies a blemished horse like that." "Handsome is that handsome does," said my master. "You are only taking him on trial. I'm sure you will do fairly by him, young man. If he is not as safe as any horse you ever drove, send him back." I was led to my new home, placed in a comfortable stable, fed and left to myself. The next day, when the groom was cleaning my face, he said, "Oh, that is just like the star that Black Beauty had. He is much the same height, too. I wonder where he is now." A little farther on, he came to the place in my neck where I was bled and where a little knot was left in the skin. He almost started and began to look me over carefully, talking to himself. White star in the forehead, one white foot on the other side, this little knot in that place. Then, while looking at the middle of my back, "As I am alive! There's that little patch of white hair that John used to call Beauty's threepenny bit. It must be Black Beauty. Why, Beauty! Beauty, do you know me? Little Joe Green that almost killed you?" And he began patting and patting me as if he were quite overjoyed. I could not say that I remembered him, for now he was a fine-grown young fellow, with black whiskers and a man's voice. But I was so sure he knew me, and that he was Joe Green, and I was very glad. I put my nose up to him and tried to say that we were friends. I never saw a man so pleased. "Give you fair trial? I should think so, indeed. Oh, I wonder who the rascal was that broke your knees, my old Beauty. Oh, you must have been badly served out somewhere. Well, well, it won't be my fault if you haven't had good times of it now. Oh, I just wish John Manley was here to see you." In the afternoon I was put into a low park chair and brought to the door. Miss Ellen was going to try me, and Green went with her. I soon found that she was a good driver, and she seemed pleased with my paces. I heard Joe telling her about me, and that he was so sure I was Squire Gordon's old Black Beauty. When we returned, the other sisters came out to hear how I had behaved myself. She told them what she had just heard, and said, "I shall certainly write to Mrs. Gordon, and tell her that her favorite horse has come to us. Oh, how pleased she will be." After this, I was driven every day for a week or so, and as I appeared to be quite safe, Miss Lavinia herself at last ventured out in the small close carriage. After this, it was quite decided to keep me, and call me by my old name of Black Beauty. I have now lived in this happy place a whole year. Joe is the best and kindest of grooms. My work is easy and pleasant, and I feel my strength and spirits all coming back again. Mr. Thoroughgood said to Joe the other day, "On your place he will last till he is 20 years old, perhaps more. Willie always speaks to me when he can, and treats me as his special friend. My ladies have promised that I shall never be sold, and so I have nothing to fear." And here my story ends. My troubles are all over, and I am at home. And often before I am quite awake, I fancy I am still in the orchard at Birtwick, standing with my old friends under the apple trees.
Oh, goodness. Excuse me. I know I've mentioned this before, but the ending of Black Beauty always makes me cry, if not weep. And especially after reading through the last 6 chapters in one night and seeing him go from, the lovely home he had with Jerry, and then he lost his friend Captain, and then things looked good for a bit, but then he lost his position with Jerry, and then, like he feared, and what had happened to Ginger as well, he went from place to place, mistreated, horribly ill-used, not even a comfort or a friend. And then, by sheer luck, the book comes around, and Black Beauty finds himself in the hands of little Joe Green, not so little anymore, and in a place where he is taken care of.
And I'm tearing up again. The very last paragraph, or like couple of sentences, I could say, always get to me. And especially the phrase, or like the last little bit here, quote, "And so I have nothing to fear, and here my story ends. My troubles are all over, and I am at home." Oh, just something about that phrase, especially, and I think the reason that makes me tear up and cry so much is, maybe I'm very emotional, but I think part of it is just after reading the entire book and seeing the journey Black Beauty has gone through and being able to relate to the journey that Black Beauty has been through. Different names, different masters, different owners, different environments, different places where he was loved, unloved, treated as a friend almost, and treated as nothing but a dumb commodity. And then to arrive someplace where he has nothing to fear. His troubles are over and he is home. And that is just, I think, one of the most lovely endings to a book I have ever read in my entire life. And especially what really drives the waterworks, please excuse me, I'm just trying to keep it together. But after the quote I said previously, quote, "And often before I am quite awake, I fancy I am still in the orchard at Birtwick, standing with my old friends under the apple trees." And that, as a sentimentalist myself, as someone who gets extremely sentimental, if you could not tell by my voice at this moment, just being able to, I think that is one of the most bittersweet things about being an adult, is looking back over your life and remembering the good times you had with your friends. I liken this to when I was in college back in the day, and the times that I would be sitting there with my friends and we would be talking and laughing, and at that moment there wasn't a care in the world. I was simply with them and everyone was all right. And then within a few short years, we parted ways, grew apart, and then one of my dearest and closest friends was suddenly gone. And I think that's why that last paragraph, those last few sentences really get to me. And this might sound weird, but I hope they get to you too, in this sense of this feeling of completion, of Black Beauty, and we'll talk about this in the Vesta Vox episode, Black Beauty's resilience through everything in life. He never became angry, violent, lashed out. He persevered. And through his perseverance, one day he was able to reach a special place where he would be taken care of. And he would still be able to work and still be able to do the things that he wanted to do. But he was safe. He was home. His troubles were over. And he could safely sit there and think fondly back to a time when life was good again. So my emotions are all over the place, so I probably am not going to provide very good dissertation here at the end of this episode, though it be the last one. But we made it, everyone. We completed reading Black Beauty by Anna Sewell, and I apologize that my upload schedule has been all over the place. Life has been quite busy. I am suddenly finding I need to move, and my schooling has also been very stressful. So a lot's going on, but I still wanted to come back to this book. It sort of scrubs the soul, if you will. I'm very excited, though. I've been taking extensive notes and organizing my thoughts for the Vesta Vox episode of this book, and I can't wait to share it with you. That will probably be uploaded sometime next week. But with that being said, I'm probably going to go cry a little bit, some crying therapy, but good crying, bittersweet crying over this wonderful story. And I hope you all have a wonderful weekend and an even greater week. Pax vobiscum, everyone. Goodbye.